I'd like to call this special council and committee meeting to order. Before we proceed further, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we're located is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to reside in our community and add to the richness of our community life. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship, with the exception of Councillor McDermott.
Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest. So, Madam Clerk, I note that you've provided on the agenda that I declared a conflict or pecuniary interest at the last meeting. The delegation has already appeared, so I don't have that, but I still have the continuing conflict with respect to item 10.2, the two sets of minutes. Do I need to specifically refer to those, or does this carry over? Okay, great. So then that takes us to Planning and Development Services. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Planning and Development Services is now in session for the evening. We have a couple reports remaining that were put over for Monday. First on the agenda we have this evening is PDS 28, 2022. That's a proposed combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 97 Gorham Road. Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Zanko. That report is now on the floor for questions or comments from council. Oh, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. This is another example where, they're given a framework and they always want to work beyond it. This is about a 30 or 40% increase in the density target. I think it's a nice building. I have no question about that. I would like them to have moved it back further, but I do understand it was a staff recommendation for them to move it forward. I can understand why they did what they did, but I also understood in the meeting that they would have no problem moving it further back. That they could perhaps move it back. So I would like them to do that. That would then probably alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbor that's directly beside them. And I think they can still make it a very nice vista. They have a lot of property going back. I guess there was some conservation area there, an overlay, but hopefully they can fit that in. So I would like them to look at that. And if they can do all that, I would be, that would be good. The other concern I have is that it is hard pulling out. I think you heard the one gentleman who lives there, that he has to back out, and the other one has a U driveway. Simply for that reason, now granted, all these people who are coming out of there aren't going to be backing out of their driveway. They're going to be turning around and coming forward. But it is I've been there. Actually, I had a client who basically lived there, so I know firsthand how hard it is to come out of there. And in the summertime, it's going to be difficult. One of the suggestions I would have is that they have a sign that's saying "Do not block driveway" beyond in addition to the signs that they have, because I know that's something that if I'm slowing down because there's a traffic light or something, if I see that sign, I probably would do that. So that's all the comments I have for now.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other questions or comments from council? Your Worship.
I had, I just wanted to make sure that staff is going to follow up with respect to the concerns that were addressed. And the one question that I had, Mr. Hurlowich is here, maybe he can respond to. So we've got this, I guess the third time in about 2.5 months we've had a planner come out and tell us that this is good planning that they're proposing. We seem to think that the densities are far greater than what we've established in secondary plans. And if I hear another planner say this is good planning, I may have to go down and strangle somebody, although I'm counting on Councillor Dubanow to restrain me. But I just wonder if we can get some staff comment on that, because my greatest fear is that we've got these secondary plans, or at least they're in the works. The Rubstock Road, I know there was no secondary plan applicable to that. And the planners are quite convinced that their plans are appropriate, and our secondary plans are saying something completely different. I know that there's been a flexion of time for the Ridgeway secondary plan, but some of these things change the neighborhood significantly. Despite the fact that some of them, this one proposal that we're talking about this evening, is good in the sense that it may provide rental accommodations for seniors who want to move out of their homes, which would free up some other housing. But before I keep talking, maybe we can get some comment from the planner.
Certainly, Mr. Hurlovich?
To the mayor, the thing with density is that we're reviewing this plan under the current official plan policies because the secondary plan policies are appealed and therefore not in effect. And so therefore, under the current official plan, there are no density restrictions. And so the request, therefore, is really at council's discretion as to whether or not they feel it is too much or too little.
I thought this was the Ridgeway secondary plan.
I thought so too.
Okay, my mistake then.
I think it's right on the border.
Okay, thank
I
you.
apologize, I was meandering in my question. I'm sorry.
So it still is at council's discretion as to what the appropriate density is. Often when the planners are looking at whether or not it's compatible, they're looking at land use, residential next to residential, as opposed to perhaps commercial or an industrial employment area. And so sometimes those comments are reflective of that. There is a philosophy within planning that is called neo-traditional, where buildings are moved closer to the street. And so rather than having parking next to the city side or town sidewalk rather, we encourage buildings to be there rather than parking. But we will work with the developer with respect to Councillor Noyes' request to move the building back. I'm assuming that she means to the 7.5, which is the standard of the zone that they have requested. So we will work with them before we bring this back to council.
Thank you. Your worship?
And just on that point, I think it's important for us also to look at what the setbacks are for the houses that are in the immediate area, because that in itself could create a problem in terms of the character of the area, the neighborhood, which we haven't yet been told by the provincial government we can't consider. But so I think that's important. The other point is they need parking, and they've moved the building forward to help accommodate that as well. And I can't help but think that if they have fewer units, they'll need fewer parking spaces, and they'll be able to address that. So I don't know how you would be thinking we can deal with that. I mean, if we want to capture all of the density that they're talking about, which I think is greater than is appropriate, how would we capture that
Mr. Hurlovich?
and move the building
my
back and
apologies.
still have appropriate parking?
Right, well, my fear would be that they'd put the parking in the front yard. That's what they had initially come in with, and staff had encouraged them to put the parking at the back, which is how the building got pushed forward. So we'll have to work through that. They certainly provided a transportation parking study to say that the 1.24 parking spaces was sufficient. But again, the town standard is 1.5 per unit. So again, it's whether council accepts that lower standard. Certainly without regular bus service, I know council did deal with the on-demand service last council meeting, but certainly that isn't the total solution.
Right, and if I might, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
So I heard the planner, and I tend to agree with him. If you provide the parking, if you don't provide parking, well then people who aren't reliant upon the need for the parking spaces or more parking spaces might be more inclined to rent in that facility. That does make sense. The problem is there's no control over that. We have no idea. And I think we have to plan for the prospect that people will have a vehicle. Some of them may have two vehicles. They certainly will have people coming to visit. And, that seems to be somewhat sloughed off. And the psychology seems to be more geared to either facilities that are close to public transit or the large cities where people can get around because there is transit. So that's a concern that I have. The other big concern that I have is, and we received couple of presentations, one from Mr. Aldridge, one from Faith Blackery, that commented on a number of issues. The first issue had to do with the tenants that are currently on this property, occupying the existing units. There was a suggestion that there might be something that we could do to somewhat protect them going forward. So they're going to have to be moved. Obviously, they can't stay where they are while construction is taking place. But is there something that we can do? I think that was the Ottawa example or something of that nature that we could look at to work with the developer on?
We can certainly bring that up with the developer. Yeah, I believe it's basically a first right of refusal that they would offer units in this building. We'll take a look at the rents. I believe they did mention that some of the rents would be lower rents, more affordable. So maybe those units could be reserved for the tenants. I have seen it in the past where agreements with tenants who are being displaced, where the developer has provided things like first and last month's rent, should they find a new facility, or help them with their moving costs. Any or all of those have been used in other municipalities, so we can work with him on all of those options.
And then then there was also a reference in some of the information that we received from residents concerned about lighting. And do we have standards that address where lighting will be focused on these facilities? So, the parking lot, street lighting as an example, or lighting on the side of the building?
Right, so through site planning, we do direct where the lights shine. They have to be shielded so that the light does not go beyond the property line. But that being said, if you have a bright parking lot, it's probably similar to having a full moon on a clear night. You're still going to get, an overall ambient light level that's higher than they're probably used to now.
Yeah, and I understand that, Chair. I think we should try to make sure that it's minimized as much as possible.
Yes.
And then the final point that I have is the traffic. These traffic brief, in this case, it's a traffic brief. We've been getting traffic studies. I've never read one that has said there's a big problem, you're going to have to change your infrastructure. And that's fine, because they're doing these traffic briefs or studies in a localized area. And they're ignoring the fact that the region is about to put into the urban boundary a large parcel of property just further north on Gorham Road, which is going to be 200 plus, if it's developed, units. That doesn't count, right now Mars Homes is building a subdivision at Schooley and Michener. People aren't even in there yet, but we know there will be. There's also pressure to expand the urban boundary to the west of Schooley Road, which would create even more demand. And so I'm concerned about the fact that we're being asked to approve these things. So far, when issues near the Gorham Road corridor have arisen, we have at least raised the concerns about traffic. I've raised this repeatedly now at the region. I think they're starting to understand our concerns. And this is a very difficult road to get onto, to get off of. The hill is it's a potential danger. These buildings will be very close to that hill, and unless you've had the experience of being there on a busy traffic day, you just don't understand it. So I'm concerned, Chair, about the traffic, and I think that there needs to be a more fulsome traffic study. And I don't think the traffic studies should be confined to the little localized area. I think it needs to take into account the developments that are taking place elsewhere, both commercial and residential, because we're going to create this monster, and nobody's going to be happy. And that definitely would not be good planning, regardless of what we might be told. So those are the concerns that I have, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I happen to agree with both Councillor Noyes and Mayor Redekop. I just had a couple of clarification questions that I'd like to ask, if you don't mind.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. The shadowing that was mentioned by the two residents is of deep concern, and I can appreciate not wanting to live in a shadow most of the year myself. If the parking is put into the front and the buildings are pushed to the back, would that reduce the shadowing effect? Would you know that?
I'm going to say unlikely, because when you look at the December shadows, which were the longest shadows, the shadows from that building actually reach across to the west side, or east side rather, of Gorham Road. So if the building was moved further west, then I would expect that the detached dwelling to the north would still be in shadow for portions of the late afternoon, early evening.
Okay. And then to the point that perhaps there might be too much height to the twin buildings, is there a possibility that they'd entertain reducing that height and spreading it further as opposed to the 4?
We can discuss that with them, but I believe that the current height of the building is currently allowed under the zoning that's in place. So
Yes.
they did try to work with the height that's in place.
Yeah, I understood that. I just wondered if that perhaps would help a bit with the shadowing if they were to elongate it as opposed to keep it at the height that they were desiring at this point.
Right, well, we can explore that. I
Thank
think,
you.
staff is going to look at the number of units and parking spaces. We might as well look at that one as well in terms of another modification.
I
That
appreciate that.
There's no one solution, so maybe in combination we could achieve something.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any other members of council? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I guess my question is, when I'm looking at the density and increasing the density to 111 units per hectare, how much bigger is the building itself? Are they building the building bigger, or are they making some of the units smaller and adding on to the size of the building? How are they proposing to do this?
Yeah, I believe it's largely because they're proposing one-bedroom units, so you could appreciate if they had more two-bedroom units, the density would go down, but that wouldn't make the building any smaller. They would just take, rooms from the other units and make them all bigger. If we take a look at the floor plans.
So if this idea of what the developer is proposing, that these units will be rented to seniors, then if that doesn't work out and they're rented to single families and we need more parking, where would we park these excess vehicles?
Yeah, I don't know that a family is going to rent a one-bedroom unit, but there are some two bedrooms and a family could live there, obviously. So
Well, if a couple has 2 cars,
yes.
right? I mean, I understand what the developer is saying. Well, for the most part, these get rented out to seniors looking to, downsize or whatever. But like the mayor says, if this doesn't happen, do we have a provision for extra parking somewhere else?
No, we do. They don't have a backup. No.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time with the density, and I get what everybody's saying, but if this developer is saying that things have changed when it comes to density since the secondary plan for Ridgeway was done, then can we get something from staff to explain where we need to go with density? Because obviously, 25 to 70 units per hectare being medium density is now 100 units per hectare, according to what we've seen in the last couple of proposals that have come to council. And, I don't know that we should be anguishing over what medium density is. We need to know. You bring it in front of me and I say, well, this is what it is, and I don't agree that you want to bring in another, 30, 35 units per hectare. and then someone says, yeah, well, that's an old secondary plan.
So, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, I think I heard two things. One is you're concerned about the density of this building, which has also been expressed, so we will look at that with the developer to see if we can reduce the number of units in this project. And then the second thing I heard you ask was, do we need to keep increasing our densities beyond what we already provided for? And I think our staff can provide a separate report on that. And where I'm going in that regard is that the region has provided the population numbers for the town in terms of 2031, 41, and 51. And so staff has already calculated what those land needs are. And I'm going to say, and I wasn't here, I'm afraid, but I'm going to say, when staff looked at those figures earlier this year and identified the amount of land needed for future urban growth, they probably looked at this site as the density that's currently zoned for. So I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm going to say likely the other lands that have been identified through Crystal Beach secondary plan, through secondary plans yet to be developed for lands that the mayor has identified as urban expansion, will be identified probably, we've identified those lands as being necessary to accommodate that growth to 2051. So I think if I get the staff to look at those numbers, we could produce either a report or a memo back to council on what our land needs are, because I think that was your second question.
Okay, so then my question to the chair is, do we need to make a motion that we receive a report from staff?
Mr. Hurlovich, do you require direction from council to do that, or is that something that can be initiated at a staff level, perhaps a memo or?
Yeah, we can do that. I've written it down so we can make a note and get back to council on that.
Much appreciated. Is that
Okay, 'cause,
satisfying?
I think we need that because the residents are, they're not happy with increasing densities by 35 units per hectare, and then council goes ahead and says, well, we have to because that's the new way it is. So if we get a report from staff, maybe it'll soften the blow a little bit.
I agree. I think that would be an excellent report, and I look forward to that. Before I go to you, Councillor Noyes, I saw your hand up there. Councillor Zanko? And then I'll come back to you, Councillor Noyes.
Yes, thank you. I agree with all of my colleagues. I also have concern with regard to the density, shadowing, and really the parking. The developer was here. I understand he's trying to have the most profitable situation. The apartment building, it does look quite beautiful, but when they have all of these asks as far as reducing of parking, that concerns me. I think we have an issue with parking currently, and I know from previous developments, I said personally that I wouldn't be supporting anything that was reduced as far as pricing goes. Parking goes. So, just some feedback from me. I think that you've heard this tone throughout all of council, so I'm sure you're going to be taking this back with you. But I think they're definitely valid concerns.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Hurlovich, I'm just wondering, before I go to Councillor Noyes, would it be possible to perhaps, that report that you have regarding the density, perhaps would it be possible to roll perhaps some information about parking and how that impacts density and what we're seeing elsewhere? I think that might give a more fulsome view to the situation for council when considering these situations in the future. It was just a thought, if you think that's within the context of the report you're speaking to.
I think we can look at parking requirements would affect lot coverage and similar kinds of things. So the more parking we have, either the building has to go up or be wider. If it's wider, then so it is relational to the discussion.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Actually, it goes a little on this, but also, Mr. Hurlovich, you were talking about the staff report. And just a thought, because we're looking at the year 2051, which is 29 years from now, not only, I'm hoping in the report would also indicate what our yearly targets are, as opposed to trying to get it all done in the first 5 years. and how much land is available to do that. So it just seems these last particular 6 or 7 months, we've been inundated with huge increases in density. And the reason being given, our target for 2051, but we don't have to do it in 2022 and 2023. So if the report could perhaps indicate the timelines, like what our target on a yearly basis should be in regard to the available land that can be used for higher density. And the only other comment I wanted to make with Councillor Zanko's comment about the parking, it's unfortunate that the provincial government has decided that we're all transportation hubs, and that parking isn't so important anymore because we can all walk to the subway or the train. I'm being facetious here, but thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Mr. Hurlovich?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, just to the councillor's point, I don't think we can provide yearly targets, but it is a sliding scale, and I believe they're worked out in some 5-year increments, so I provide something like that. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Yeah, Your Worship.
Yeah, so just to go back to the density, if the density for which this property is zoned or followed, I suspect we wouldn't have problems with the number of parking spaces nor the location of the building. But insofar as these two buildings do exceed the current zoned density, and there is the shadowing issue, why couldn't we, as an example, suggest to the developer, that the northerly building be reduced in height? That takes 10 units out right away, reduces it a bit, and addresses part of the parking issue problem. He may say, and undoubtedly will say, and I don't want to give him any ideas, but I would imagine he's going to say that it doesn't work financially if we do that. With all due respect, Councillor Noyes, we had a presentation today at the Planning Committee at the Region about housing supply. And I don't think the developers that are coming in here have an eye to the fact that 2,200 new residents has been allocated to Crystal Beach. I think they have an eye for how much money can I make out of this parcel of property, and how do I best message that to the municipality? Okay, first thing I do is I say there's going to be affordable housing. Second thing I'm going to say is we need to have these units because there's, people can't buy the houses because they're so expensive. And then when you look at it, the cost of these units is nowhere near affordable. And we've had developers coming in here asking, well, if I put in so many units on this parcel, what kind of incentives are there for me? I say, well, what's the price point for your units? $650,000. Well, there are no incentives because you should be able to generate that revenue. So I would suggest maybe look at that type of solution, which really gets the developer in the direction of where we think they should be, which is how we've zoned the property. And so that might resolve a number of issues. Second thing is, there was a question about sidewalk. I would imagine that for the frontage of the property, we can require sidewalks.
Yes.
But then I think Ms. Delwaria or whoever was handling this, maybe it was Mr. Van.
Daryl,
Yeah.
Van.
I think maybe he suggested in response to one of the questions, maybe by Councillor Lubberts or Councillor Butler, that that we could look at infrastructure and see what the long-term plans are. There definitely needs to be a sidewalk on that side of the property. If there's going to be a multi-unit buildings at this location, there definitely needs to be a sidewalk on that side of the road. The other thing is, that's still a regional road at that location, I believe, until it gets to the stoplights. So we really should be having some dialogue with the region on any, well, I know they don't have any immediate plans, but there needs to be some plans, and I've also been banging the drum at the region repeatedly now about the need for another access point. This is not going to be adequate. So we should be looking at the sidewalks, and there was one final point that had cropped up, and what was it? Well, I guess we're all lucky I've forgotten.
Well, don't say too lucky, because I may hand the chair over to speak to this in a moment, so our luck may run out. Before, actually, I see Councillor Lubberts' hand up again. So before I do that, I'll go to Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just to get back to the parking, if they're requesting increase in density limits to 111, then, you know, they're asking us to bend a little bit. They have to be willing to bend a little bit themselves with the parking. And when you're asking for more units, you're also asking for, you're going to get more parking, more cars that need to be parked. And what they want to do is they want to add more units, but then they want to subtract from the parking. And to me, that math doesn't work. They have to recognize that if they're adding more units, they have to have more parking. So if he wants 36 more units per hectare, then he can't reduce the parking that much, the number of parking spaces per unit.
Right.
So he's going to have to bend along with what he expects the municipality to bend.
Yeah, so I
I
think
think
the direction.
we need to let him know that.
Right, so, Mr. Chair, I think staff has been given the direction to work with the developer to see if we can bring the number of units down, increase the number of parking spaces, or maybe the ratios work down as the units come down, the parking ratios end up coming higher than they currently are proposed. So we'll work with the developer.
Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, because when it comes to parking, once he's done and his units are rented, then the parking issue comes to this chambers. It doesn't go to the developer anymore. You know, the people come to council and say, you know, you need to do something about this parking. We can't park. We have nowhere for our guests. What do we do with our guests? We're getting tickets on the street, this and that. So why do we have to inherit the problems in the future? And then, you know, they just walk away. And so they have to bend.
Thank you, Councillor Lubberts. Before I briefly hand the chair over to Councillor Zanko, if she's willing to assume it so I can speak, do either Councillor Zanko or Councillor Butler wish to speak again? Okay. Councillor Zanko, would you assume the chair briefly just so I can ask some questions and speak to this? Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Hurlovich, has the developer given any indication that their intent is to limit the building specifically to senior citizens?
Other than what I heard on Monday night, I'm not aware of anything in writing.
Okay. And through you again, Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we could perhaps maybe get that in writing or perhaps a more clear indication, because I think with regard to parking and other concerns that we may have regarding this proposal, if the rental is limited specifically to seniors, that may help alleviate some of those concerns. And the reason I mention that is I go back to Douglas Heights on High Street. It's a seniors building. It's either 50 or 60 units off the top of my head. But as many of us know, as we age in place, the reliance on multiple vehicles tends to drop. So it might help give us a more comfort level with some of the parking asks if we know that we're likely to have the kind of tenants who would not be as reliant on an automobile. And Madam Chair, if I may, a few more questions. Has there been any discussion given to, I know members of council had brought up moving the building back or, perhaps staggering height between the two buildings. Has there been any discussion given perhaps to an L-shaped or perhaps like an offset where one building is either, kind of along the back and then we have another to the south, which is closer to the front? I think that may provide a bit of a compromise with allowing the front of the one building to front the road and provide that amenity space and that community access area they talked about, while at the same time, forgive me if I get his name right, I think it was Mr. Lillet who lives to the north. That may help offset some of the concerns he has with the second building being so close and potentially shadowing in privacy with his property. So I'm just wondering if that's something we might be able to look at, just to kind of try and find a compromise here between the concerns of the residents and the developer's requests. I am going to speak to the issue of this type of housing. I understand the challenges that we have with these density requests, and they certainly can be daunting at times, particularly when you find them in areas that we're not used to seeing them. I'm torn on this because on one hand, I understand that we have residents who live in this area, and we have to work with those residents to ensure that their needs are respected. But at the other time, I look back to the housing study that we did, and I think it was presented to council in 2019, and I think it mentioned that over the next few years, we're going to need 2,000 apartment-style units in Fort Erie, and that particularly seniors are the individuals who face the greatest core housing need in our community. And it's difficult for me, when I see a proposal come forward that is going to be a seniors apartment building that is going to have primarily one-bedroom units, which are, the study identified we have a very high need of in this community. And then also at the same time, we look at, concerns about density and traffic. It's a difficult situation we're in. I certainly hope planning staff will take this into account. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of discussions we can have with the developer to address some of the concerns that the neighboring residents brought up. And it's going to be a challenge for this current council and even the next council we have coming up to kind of almost reconcile the need for the changing style of housing and the affordability crisis we're facing with the reality of the community we have, the type of life we live, the expectations we have. This is going to get tough. It's going to be a discussion that's going to be going on for many years, and it's something that it's going to be a challenge. This is not our first, and it won't be our last, and I certainly hope that when we have requests come in to increase density like this, that there's a benefit, whether it be affordable housing for seniors or affordable condominiums for families to enter the housing market. I think when we have these requests for increased density, there has to be a benefit to the municipality for that increase in density, and I think I see a little bit of that in this, and I'm hoping that we can work together and find a compromise to ensure that whatever it is, that it's something we can work together and ensure as close to a happy medium as possible. And that's all I have to say on this, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries, and I will pass the chair back to you, Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. And thank you very much also on Monday when you assumed the chair. I know that was a long night, and I personally appreciate the work you did. So that moves us on to our next report, PDS 29-2022. That is the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 3914 Alexandra Road. That's the information report. Can I get a mover for that? Councillor Noyes. So that report is now on the floor for questions or comments from council. Councillor Noyes.
My only comment is that I think this is good use of this property. He's not making it a two-story. He's not exaggerating the size or whatever. He could probably make it a much bigger house and ask for variances, and he's not really doing that. So, and the fact that there's been no public concerns that I can recall, then I'm very much in favor of this. I think that this is good use of an existing lot, an undersized existing lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other comments, questions from council? All right, so I'm seeing none. I will call the question. All those in favor? So that's carried. So that's all we have for reports this evening. Do we have any matters of new business or inquiries that members of council want to bring up this evening? All right, seeing none. Any questions or comments regarding the business status report? Your worship, I hand the chair back to you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Dubanow. That takes us to Infrastructure Services, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure Services is now in session. There are no presentations and delegations. There are no reports. Any questions on new business inquiries? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions. I received, so did all of council, I believe, and perhaps Mr. Walsh, but I did receive an updated email from Richard Bertrand with respect to receiving an information report from the Niagara Regional Police regarding incidents that occur on Ridge Road in the downtown core. And I know that Councillor Noyes had responded to him to let him know that she's forwarded on to the traffic committee. So what I'd like to do is just ask Mr. Walsh if he sees his way through to seeing that speed being reduced in the Ridgeway core as a direct result. I don't think you've had a chance to look at that email.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, I haven't had a look at it. Staff's preference at this time is to defer any decisions on any traffic calming requests townwide until we can get our traffic calming policy in place. You'll see in the business status report, it's listed for June 13th right now with the addition of the future June 20th meeting. We're going to push those 4 traffic reports to there where staff can get or council can get a good look at it. So long answer short, we'll defer that until traffic calming policy in place. We have a number of hotspots, I'll call them, town-wide that keep coming up. They're on our target list, and certainly Ridge Road in this area is one of them.
Thank you very much. And Madam Chair, if I can ask one more question. The Nicholas Road, I've been informed, and I did go down there that, and I didn't see this myself, but there has been a number of dump trucks and construction trucks that have been entering in and out of that road and has caused damage to the road, so much so that the residents are concerned about damage to their vehicles. And I'm just wondering if you would be able to send someone down to take a look at that.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Madam Chair, we certainly can. It should be noted that last year the town passed a bylaw regarding weight limits on all surface treated roads. So if we've got a firmer for exceeding those, we can take immediate action on that, but we can have a look at the road as well.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That's it,
further?
thank you. No.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Walsh, I'm going to save you an email reply since we're talking about traffic calming measures. I have a resident that has requested a children at play sign, and can you just refresh my memory on the cost of that?
So we have, through you, Madam Chair, we do have a sign program in place. Slow Down, Think of Us is what it is. And I believe the signs are $100 each.
Installed?
Installed, yeah. Taxes in, too.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Walsh, just further to that, these children at play, are there not some requirements, criteria for where these signs should be put?
The Madam Chair, the children at play diamond are very specific about where they go, and essentially it's playgrounds. Our Slow Down, Think of Us signs are non-regulatory in display, and they are on request by residents. There was, until a number of years ago when the regulations changed, we had innumerable children at play signs, the yellow diamonds. We've corrected that to meet the regulation. So these signs would go typically in a subdivision or an area where there are many children at play, and it's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any further questions? Mayor Redekop.
Yeah, I think I've raised this with Mr. Walsh and the CAO, and this has to do with a tree that's fallen over 6 Mile Creek immediately south of Dominion Road. And it's been there for a while. I'm not sure if we have a drainage superintendent now, but I wonder if somebody could take a look at that, because it may be part of the process to prevent water from getting down 6 Mile Creek to flood the neighbors in heavy rains, or it may be that the beavers are starting to build a dam, but it looks like that is starting to become more of a permanent structure.
Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, I can take a look at that, Madam Chair. For clarity, that was south of Dominion on the lakeside?
Immediately south, like
All right.
about 100 feet from the road.
Sure. And for council's information, Troy Davidson has assumed the role of drainage superintendent. Just recently, he passed his courses. He took over Monday, I believe. So congratulations to Troy on that. So the search is on for a new surveyor in the never-ending cycle.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anything further from council? Seeing none, that brings us to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, infrastructure services is now closed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. That takes us to corporate and community services. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Corporate and Community Services is now opened. And for clarification, I wonder, Madam Clerk, it says that there are 2 presentations and delegations, but no one here. Did they present before? Oh, via Zoom. Oh, I apologize. Okay, so the first delegation is Marcy and Jennifer, and I apologize in advance for mispronouncing this, Michelik, 236 Lincoln Road West, regarding request for encroachment agreement, Ulster Lane, report number CAO-06, LC-09-202022. And they have a PowerPoint presentation.
Greetings to the Honorable Mayor Redekop, esteemed council members, and the public. My name is Darcy Michelik. This is my wife, Jennifer. We reside at 236 Lincoln Road West. Are you able to hear us okay? Excellent. Okay. I just want to start with a little statement. After attending the council meeting on Monday that we had appeared to in person, it was at this time that we recognized that our presentation that we have submitted is not necessarily satisfactory in explaining the details that I now understand will be required for the ongoing request to enter into an encroachment agreement with the town of Fort Erie. And as a result, I don't know if we should perform that PowerPoint that was submitted. If I can turn things over to my wife, she'd like to read a statement to the council, if it please.
Sure, please do.
Thank you, and greetings, Honorable Mayor Redekop, esteemed council members, and the public. What makes a town happy? Is it the sewers? Is it the longitude, the latitude? Is it the stores, the convenience? Or is it the jobs, or is it the roads? In my world, I like to think it's because of the people of the town. When we first arrived to this town in Crystal Beach, we met a gentleman at Bee Beach. He just walked up to us and asked us if we lived here in Crystal Beach. We told him that we were considering buying and that we were meeting an agent that day in the afternoon. He told us that the town was so friendly. He said that he moved into the town and never looked back. He talked with us on the beach for almost an hour, and we thought that this was the friendliest place on the planet. We found a place that we loved, and we made the leap to find our peaceful, friendly place to relax. See, we are 2 nurses, and we have been through a very difficult time, being that we were and still are in a pandemic. We were still expected to go to hospitals, to go to the community where we work. During that whole time, we've had our vacation time denied. Our workload increased to levels that we feel are unsafe, and yet we work tirelessly to keep the community safe. We found this one place in Crystal Beach to come to get away from the stress of our lives. We have met some fabulous people along the way, our new great friends, Wendy and Steve, Amanda and Sean, due to this current issue. Jane, who makes the best cronuts and bakery. Regan, the owner and bright, wonderful girl who opened up the Utopia Bar. We have bought amazing cheeses and meats from cheese shops, and every Saturday or Sunday, we go to the beach market in hopes that they will have some cabbage rolls and some soup for Sunday lunch. We go to San Vito's, Casa Hugo, or South Coast every Friday night, and sometimes even Saturday. We meet people so happy to be here. We love the beach, scented candles at Planks. We have bought a lot of decorations at CQ. We visit Merchandise for the calendars of the sunset of Crystal Beach, also noting that the proceeds go to the Dream Center. We have a nice chat with Gail at the front counter. We have hired David, a local, for jobs such as cutting our grass and shoveling our driveway. For all these reasons, we are proud to be here and feel that we are good to have in a community that is thriving currently. The people of Crystal Beach are very proud of this place, and you can see it everywhere. While we go to the beach with bags in our hands collecting glass, we see others removing potentially harmful rocks from the entry areas of the water. We see others collecting garbage along with us. You can also see this on Ulster Lane. We have, along with others, picked up garbage in the laneway, planted grass seeds and perennials. We've mowed the grass and cared lovingly for this area. You have 4 neighbors banding together and being proud of this lane. It would make perfect sense to allow the neighbors surrounding this lane to be allowed to continue to care for it. At this time, our laneway is walkable with resident-maintained community garden, lots of wildlife, including squirrels and birds. There is plenty of room at the laneway for both the sidewalk and our fence. The town can install a 5 to 6 foot wide sidewalk that would preserve some of the already existing natural features for plant and wildlife. At this time, this is a complete disruption of this happy time. Having to tear down a fence that has been in place for a long time, for 1 foot, is not conducive to trust and happiness. One wonders if the city council is ready to disrupt life for these and other residents, and what else are they capable of? What else is coming if it is so important to this council that they need so much more room in order to be able to work and not work with a solution for us all, with us residents? If 1 foot would be able to make a Crystal Beach a happier place and for the residents to be safer and better, then we would happily give up this area, but we cannot see why disruptive lives and cause hardships for your residents would be best for people from Crystal Beach. We question why and wonder if there's going to be a road to put in and polluting our air with the emissions from ambulance that, as nurses, we have witnessed watching the operating room having to be shut down due to the air quality as ambulance were too close to the building and the windows. We have a 3-bedroom home with a few feet from these emissions should they go through this way. More follow-up would be needed, but a quick look at these emissions according to the Environment of Ontario, cancer of the bladder, the liver, the lungs, asthma, skin disorders, and other lung problems. This is not an environment that we would be happy to stay in. We're also not ready for a long drawn-out fight with this, and we would, with great reluctance, have to sell, and will likely see a great decline of our property worth, as we know for a fact that no one would want to own a place this close to a road, if that's the case. What's going to stop other cars and gas vehicles to enter this area? The sign will not be sufficient. As anyone can see, the cars get confused and go the wrong way on Lincoln at least once a week, despite all the signage. I did have some information from the Government of Canada about how traffic can take your breath away, but I will probably skip that at this point. And if there's any questions, I can refer to that after.
Thank you very much.
Pardon me? I'm sorry, I thought I heard something. We feel we can accept that this 0.3 meter must be given for the greater good of the community, but raise concerns what is next. Route for only emergency vehicles, that they also give emissions that can cause serious illnesses. We also feel that keeping our fence and the boundaries it gives will continue our good faith in the city council and that the council has in its own residents. We will continue to give without asking, continue to improve the area without asking, and have pride in our home and community. We also note that if unsuccessful, we require more time to comply with these deadlines. When we, in October 2021, moved, we have struggled to find a contractor to complete the fence in the front area to contain our dogs. We have tried 3 different contractors and texts to prove that we have, and it continues to take time as it has not even been continued, with us still asking as of September. So I'm very dry, I'm very nervous. We would require to put a fence for safety for our dogs and for us, also for privacy and a sense of security. As noted, we just moved in October and we have put in a lot of money into our new home with upgrades and needed furniture. We need time to secure these funds and the work that is needed to be done, as this is a pandemic time. As a side note, we were not actually made aware of the encroachment due to our lawyers slow acting, and we actually didn't find out about this until March. So we have not had a lot of time. We are not physically able, nor do we have the time to take this fence down. We also need to have some safety in place for our protection. Being that we are within a pandemic time and the nursing shortage is very prevalent, and we need to devote this time to healthcare, and it is a very urgent need. In summary, to quote the Christmas Vacation, a healthy bottom line doesn't mean much when you hurt the people you depend on. It's little people like us, Sean and Amanda, Jane, Regan, David, just to name a few, that make all the difference. We appeal to this court to allow for this peaceful, enjoyable place to continue, also to have a feel-good verdict at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any member of council have any questions, Your Worship?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. and Ms. Michalik, for your presentation. And we appreciate that you've moved to this community. We take a great deal of pride in our community, and I can see that you take pride as well. You are members of the public, but there are 33,000 other members of the public in Fort Erie. So my question is, when you purchased this property, did you have title insurance? Do you have title insurance?
Yes.
Okay, so that's an issue you may want to discuss with your lawyer with respect to this matter, regardless of how it turns out. That's an
We
issue.
actually have talked to our lawyer, and he said that it doesn't count for some reason.
Then you may want to get a second opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does any other member have questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
The next delegation is Matthew Hallowesh, solicitor for Martin Shepard Fraser, Amanda Harris, and Sean Slater, 329 Cambridge Road West, and it's regarding request for encroachment agreement, Ulster Lane, report number CAO-06 LC-09-2022.
Good evening, Your Worship and Town Council. It's good to meet you or to appear in front of you this evening. We stayed up pretty late on Monday waiting to have this chance. So I'm a lawyer in Niagara Falls, Martin Shepard Fraser. I did some real estate law in Welland as well. I'm here on behalf of clients, Amanda Harris and Sean Slater. Good folks. I sat with them the other night. I've met with them a couple of times. We've discussed the issue of title insurance, as Mayor Redekop had mentioned a few minutes ago. Hopefully we don't have to exercise that option. But you know, I think there's a little bit of thought we should do prior to considering title insurance. The mayor, my client's neighbors to the rear, articulated things very nicely. They're very their views align well with those of my clients, and you know, before rushing into a decision to take away a foot of land, I think it's important to review some of the materials that were submitted by Sean and Amanda, as well as Rick and Darcy and Jennifer as well. One of the main things I wanted to kind of confirm with council and the mayor as well, that whether they had an opportunity to review some of the submissions that were made last week. Those were, there was a presentation prepared by Amanda Harris. It's quite, it's quite demonstrative. It features a cost-benefit analysis of what's at stake here. I guess it all boils down to the fact that the gains to be received here are not proportionate to the detriment that's possible on these residents. I mean, we have my clients stand to lose their driveway as a whole. The fence, which has been there for many, many years, has to be torn down, and then they lose a garden and their patio in the back, and it's the same thing with their neighbors to the back. So, you know, I don't think the benefit is proportionate to the detriment here, right? And in the principle of proportionality is something that I think Mayor Redekop appreciates, right? It's something that councillors should appreciate too. I know you folks make a heck of a lot of decisions in one day, or you consider a lot of material in front of you. So your analytical approaches are ones, you know, that factor in the principle of proportionality. And in the current case, I think that the cons are going to outweigh the pros here. And it's important to realize that a compromise can also be reached, as stated by the previous presenters. We can easily have a sidewalk here for pedestrians without disturbing what's already there. And I think my clients are of the same view that they're not really up for this disruption at this time. So we have a list of items here that were prepared, speaking notes that I submitted previously. Really, it boils down to this cost-benefit analysis, and as you know, if you look at the map of the area, residents have access to Belfast Road as well as Shannon Road if they want to walk to the Queen's Circle. Right, so that's less than a kilometer away, which kind of reduces the need for an additional way of getting down to Queen's Circle, right? I mean, do we really need a third point of access here? There's that's kind of weighing against the proposal. Another thing my client pointed out was there's probably only about 12 houses that stand to benefit from any walkway being put there, and currently there's only around 3 active businesses in the center of the circle, so it's not necessarily major thoroughfare, right? And I think a lot of folks want to keep it that way too, which is part of the charm of Crystal Beach, right? It's nice and it's quiet, and it's quiet. That's why folks like it, right? Again, I'd like to reinforce the idea that the compromise can be reached here. It's things have been measured twice, measured 3 times, and even 4 times, and a sidewalk can coexist with existing fence lines, existing structures. So I just wanted to ensure that town council is aware of that fact, that things can coexist. It's a win-win situation for everyone. So I'll let my client take over. She wanted to emphasize a few aspects pertaining to the green spaces around the area. So if the administrative staff could let her participate, that would be okay with me.
Was that it? Mr. Hollowich?
That's it for me at the moment, but I think Amanda's going to join. She's on mute though, so.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harris?
Hello, Honorable Council and Your Worship. Thank you for taking the time to hear our request. I just wanted to add and reiterate, we came to Crystal Beach in 2018 and we purchased this beautiful property so that we can start to make plans for our retirement, settle into the community, make friends, and just, put in the things like, we'll probably need new kitchen, new bathroom before we are ready to retire here. But we love this house. We love this town. We had no idea or inclination that there was an encroachment on Ulster Lane. But I did want to really hit on the point that when we found out that there might be an issue, the first thing that struck me is the beautiful community garden that has been established here. The community garden existed before we purchased the property, but we've maintained it now for almost 4 years, along with our neighbors, and trying to as well. I've spent time trying to build up, putting more native-oriented plants and seeds in there to perpetuate the health of pollinators. There's mature trees in the laneway. There's plenty of creatures, chipmunks, bunnies, skunks, birds that, if we disrupt this land too much, it could be an issue. Our neighbors have indicated that they really love this particular part of the laneway. We really believe that our part of the laneway is the most walkable and beautiful in Crystal Beach. And as Matthew said, with an encroachment agreement, we would still be able to have a sizable sidewalk of 5 feet wide, and it could be 6 feet at the intersections of Ulster and Lincoln, so that it's more accessible, as according to the standards outlined by the federal government. So it can be more accessible for people with disabilities. And with the population size we have, even with the planned intensification over 19 years of an additional 13,000 households to Fort Erie, I still think that this is a viable compromise and something that we as a town could build on. Of course, the other real issue for us is that the way the property is a heritage property, first established in 1919. It's not a very big lot, and the driveway has been there for a considerable long time, and it was always assumed that this was the driveway. If we lose that amount of land, we have no place to park, and as the Honorable Council and Your Worship knows, there is no street parking, and in the winter months. And I don't know what our options would be, because the frontage is quite small on the property, and obviously we can't drive down Ulster Lane to park our car. But again, I just wanted to, I don't want to overtake our time, because I know we had a late night on Monday. We just really wanted to say that we're hoping that we can talk and consider a compromise. And if town council won't consider a compromise, if we could have more time than the end of September to resolve this issue, because there's real issues with supply chain and contractors are really busy, and we can't dictate like how quickly we can change and move things to resolve this issue. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Does any member of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Slater, for your presentation, also Mr. Hollowich. My question is, in regards to the encroachment, I'm trying to visualize, I didn't drive by. So your fence is actually on town property?
This is what the surveys are suggesting, yes, that the fence, I guess, the laneway isn't quite straight east and west, that it kind of veers to the south, and all the neighbors have built, assuming it's straight, of course, right? And so the fence is a little bit out at the most easterly corner, but then it seems to get a little bit larger as it gets to the front, because it's trying to correct for the fact that apparently the lots are not straight.
Oh, thank you. For a further question, on what side of the fence is the garden?
On both sides.
On both sides, okay.
Yeah, I have a beautiful established perennial garden and on the Ulster Lane side, so I recognize that would be considered an encroachment as well. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any property markers indicating that this is town-owned land, or?
No, I don't believe there are property markers indicating that. This was just, I believe it's a survey and that they used other reference points to determine.
I guess a further question through the chair. If the town were willing to compromise, as Matthew was suggesting, and we would want the public to know that this is town-owned land, would you have a problem with that? In other words, a visitor could come and enjoy the garden, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, would we have a problem?
No,
I'm sorry.
no,
absolutely
not.
not. They already, our neighbors come. We maintain that garden for the purpose of our neighbors that walk their dogs down that laneway. Of course, I love gardening too. This is something that when we were first married, Sean introduced me to, because his grandparents owned greenhouses in Guelph. So he really introduced me to it, and I just fell in love with it. And it's one of my pieces.
Okay. One final question. How much of a front yard do you have? I know some of the smaller lots in Crystal Beach, for the exact reason that you mentioned, parking problems, have now changed their front yard to basically create a parking space. Could you do that if you wanted to? Is it possible?
Extremely difficult.
Yeah, you can speak.
It's maybe 12 feet from the sidewalk.
So we can't park
Roughly.
straight in. We would have to take out the front garden and hardscaping to try and put the car in. And as mentioned in the document, there's a hydro pole that's actually three feet inside the south part of our driveway. So we're already having to maneuver around that, even with this encroachment. We called Fortis because Honorable Councillor Lubberts suggested that maybe that hydro pole can be moved, and they said they will come out within 10 business days to assess that. But we have no further details at that point. But the hydro pole provides power to 4 residents, and it's not just hydro, actually, it's also Bell. So it's providing Bell to us, neighbors on both sides, and the neighbor across the road. So I don't know how easy it would be for that to happen. And this is the issue. So the answer is, if that was our only alternative, we would have to do our level best to try and get the car in there somehow. But at this point, we're not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Your worship?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Harris and Mr. Slater, for coming out along with your lawyer, Mr. Hollowatch. Just a few questions. So in hearing from Mr. Hollowatch, you do have title insurance with respect to your purchase?
We do.
And prior to because you have title insurance, you probably didn't get a survey?
Correct. There was not a survey when we purchased the property.
And are you familiar with the Crystal Beach secondary plan?
We are.
So you know that this laneway was identified in that plan to be utilized by the public at large?
Yes, and we have no issue with that. We just would like to share that with the public, because there is still about 11 to 9 feet of that laneway left. We're not taking the whole laneway to park, Your Worship.
Well, your issue is you want to share it with the public. That's your issue. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Any other members of council? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. As far as the gardens, you said that they're on both sides of the fence?
Yes,
And are they the same depth on each side?
it's
Or
a little
width or whatever?
shallower, it's a little shallower on ours, well, on the encroachment side that faces us as opposed to, it's deeper on the laneway. There's
How wide would they be on?
when it obviously in the fall and winter they don't exist. In the dead of summer, it's hostas, so they probably take about 1.5 feet. Hostas, lilies, and other things, but hostas take up some space
So they're about 1.5 feet on each side, or?
of the fence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, all right, thanks.
No other member of council? Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
That moves us to reports, and the first report is CAO-28 LC-20-2021 Land Matters, December 2nd, 2021 Land Committee meeting minutes. Can I have a mover? Oh, it was postponed. Yeah, it's already on the floor. I apologize. Would anybody like to speak to that? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Butler. This was a presentation I think we had from Mr. Maskell, right, on Monday night in regards to...
Yes, it is.
And his wife. Again, I don't like encroachments without permission, but again, I wouldn't allow them to encroach, but I also wouldn't ask for the stuff to be removed. I don't think, they don't have to go hand in hand. I would put up I would suggest that a property marker be put up to say, okay, this is town-owned land, and if people want to go and enjoy the lovely vegetation, as long as it's not causing a problem. From what I understand repeatedly, they mentioned that there is no sightline problem. There's no problem. Like, why would we want them to take down these trees and these bushes if they're not causing a problem? And like, if we owned the land and there was no encroachment, would we be taking these things down? I can't imagine that we would be, unless there was a purpose to the need of the land, so to speak. And I don't see any purpose to taking anything down if it's not really causing any hardship. I wouldn't give them an encroachment agreement. I want to be really clear on that. But I would put up a property marker indicating this is town-owned land, and I think that's a win-win situation. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a very similar viewpoint as Councillor Noyes. During Ms. Helston's, and I apologize because I mispronounced her name when she was up here and we spoke. During her presentation, she had mentioned several town policies related to vegetation on road allowances, and I had asked her some specific questions about the age of the trees and the vegetation, and ultimately would they survive if they were moved to another location. And it's very difficult for me knowing that we have a lot of wooded road allowances here across Fort Erie. Certainly I think we got Alliston Road allowance. Part of it's cleared out, and then you have vegetation on either side. It's not the only vegetated road allowance in the town. And it's very difficult for me sitting here as a councillor to essentially support the idea of removing some vegetation and not others, getting into debates over what vegetation was already there, what should be removed, what should be done at the expense of the neighbor. It's just getting into a real messy situation. And I don't want to sit here and encourage residents to go and Well, maybe we do. Yeah, you know, maybe that is a discussion where, when we're having, you know, we're having tree giveaways and, you know, we've lost so much of our canopy. Maybe the road allowances aren't the right location, but certainly the municipality does encourage, you know, forestation and expanding our tree canopy, considering how much we've lost to the emerald ash borer. So I think if the neighbors are under the, and they know that this is public land, that it may at some point, and I don't think it ever will be during my lifetime, but at some point it could be cleared out and turned into a road. As long as everyone's on that understanding, I see no reason to do this. And I think there may be some confusion over what is exactly theirs and what isn't, and I think we could be running into a messier situation. So I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, if we can get some guidance from the clerk, how would we move to change this request so that the recommendation of the Land Committee, this item is not fulfilled and that the trees can remain, Madam Chair?
It's a good question, Madam Clerk.
Correct, that is a good question. So I'm looking at the original recommendation from Land Committee that the committee denies the request to enter into an encroachment agreement for 1799 Niagara River Parkway. I believe that what council would do is they would defeat it. And then if you wanted to add some other type of condition on it, then you could do that as well as an amendment.
Councillor Dubanow, would you like to do that?
Yeah, I just, for further clarification, I agree with Councillor Noyes. We should not be entering in an encroachment agreement, although I think there may be some discussion that might be appropriate in the future about the future of this road allowance and whether it's appropriate for the town to retain in the first place. I'm just wondering if we defeat this, would the staff would staff still proceed to move forward and demanding that the residents clear the road allowance? I just want to ensure that
Well, I believe what Madam Clerk was trying to say, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we defeat this and then we can put an amendment to change to what we'd like to see happen.
If I could clarify, I think I probably misspoke somewhat. There's two recommendations. The first is to deny the enter into an encroachment agreement, and that's exactly what is being proposed by council here, is to deny it. The second part of the recommendation is that the vegetation encroachment be removed, and what you're suggesting is that not be removed.
In that case,
Deal with these separately?
yes, exactly, Madam Clerk. And in that case, Madam Chair, I would like to deal with each item separately then.
Okay.
Okay. Before we go there, is there any other councillor that would like to make a comment? Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. If this is the same property that I'm thinking about, there was the neighbor has the problem with the trees, and then the other neighbors like, well, you know, we planted some trees, but one neighbor's saying, well, you know, I want some of it removed, but some of it can stay. He's, you know, but the gentleman that was in here on Monday night, he said he doesn't even know what the other neighbor wants or what the other neighbor doesn't want. And I'd like to defer this until we get something definitive from the neighbors. What is it that is okay and what do you consider not okay, so that everybody knows who wants what and who doesn't want what? Because if we agree with one, the other one's going to be upset that we didn't accompany or accommodate him and her. And, you know, I don't know that we can accommodate both, but I would like to hear from I'd like to know exactly what it is the other neighbor wants removed. I don't know what they're asking for.
All right, thank you, Councillor Lubberts. Kind of put us into a quandary here. So because Councillor Dubanow had his request first, I think we have to deal with that issue primarily before we go to, Madam Clerk, can you
If I may comment, and I believe the CAO may want to comment as well, though, both of the property owners have attended before council and made a presentation, so we have heard from the other neighbor,
Thank
the
you.
one who had the complaint.
Yes, I agree. Would you like to comment?
Sure, I guess just to address the question, there is an arrangement with one neighbor for what I understand is the driveway, which has an encroachment on the existing property for access to the property. So it's a required driveway. That is currently in place and has been for a number of years. To respond to Councillor Lubberts' question about what does the other neighbor want, and so that driveway was part of that request, and it's a widening request. And the neighbor whose item is before us tonight was, from what I understand, asking for an encroachment agreement, but I don't believe the fee was paid for the encroachment review. So that might be a moot issue anyway, because I'm not sure there was actually a formal request made. But in any case, from the presentation we heard Monday night, clearly there is some neighborhood dispute on that. But just to clarify for Councillor Lubberts, there was a request by the other neighbor for a different purpose, some encroachment which was related to their driveway. And Mr. Walsh is here. If he may have additional information, I'm not sure.
Do you want to comment?
No. Madam Chair, Chris has said everything appropriately for now.
Okay, thank you. Then we will go to Councillor Dubanow. Sorry. And then
Thank you.
Councillor Noyes. No, you go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think we need to defer this. I think we've had both residents who've had an opportunity to speak. We did have the residents comment yesterday about the one point of contention is a tree that appears to have been there for over a decade. And I mean, we're talking about trees here. We're talking about vegetation on a town road allowance, which exists all over this municipality by right. I mean, you know, the seeds fall, the trees grow, we don't go there and clear them out. And I think we're getting into a real messy situation between two neighbors here where what are his, what aren't, what should be removed, what shouldn't. It's difficult for me as a councillor to say, go and rip out trees when road allowances have them anyway. And I don't want to encourage residents, and I don't want to tell residents to go around and plant trees and road allowances, but at the exact same time, it's trees and a road allowance. I'm surprised we're even here discussing this issue about trees and a road allowance that is untraveled. I don't think we have any responsibility to accommodate either neighbor. It's a town road allowance, and it's ultimately up to council, us, to decide what we do with that road allowance. And my preference as an individual councillor, and perhaps council may have a different school of thought, but my preference is, you know, we've lost so much of our tree canopy due to the emerald ash borer. We encourage planting. We hand trees out to residents and encourage them to plant them. We have education campaigns on how to take care of trees, and we have a Communities in Bloom program, which we're trying to get up and running again. It just seems contrary to everything that we're trying to do here in Fort Erie by telling someone to rip out trees, knowing that they're going to die if they plant them again. And it just seems silly to me. So I'm not in favor of granting an encroachment agreement. I think that's off the table. I think that's just not something that's necessary. But at the same time, I'm not prepared to tell someone to remove trees when there's dispute over whose trees are what, and there's already trees that were there. It just seems, I'm surprised this is even coming to us, to be perfectly honest. And if it's my decision alone, my preference is leave the trees, but this is going to be a discussion of council. I think you know where my vote's going to be, and I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Councillor Noyes?
Thank you. Again, I have no problem with the first, that let's defeat it. I don't agree with the encroachment agreement. The second, that the vegetation has to be removed, I don't particularly agree with that. I I do feel that as long as it's not creating any safety or sightline issues, that they should be allowed. My understanding from the presenter on Monday night, the big question was the 20-foot tree. That was his main, the other neighbor's main issue, and I don't know whether, I have not visited this site, to be perfectly honest, so I don't know if it is creating a safety or a sightline issue, but I would say the vegetation stays as long as it's not creating a safety or sightline issue. But I would also like to have a property marker, so that the public does know that this is, a piece of property they can enjoy. And it sounds like it's beautiful, so whether anybody takes them up on it, but I would like a property marker. I don't know if there's any cost to that. It sounds like the survey may already be done. But if there's any cost to the property marker, then I would ask that the Maskell be responsible to cover the cost for the property marker. That's how I would change the second that.
Okay, then I will call the question with respect to the first that land committee, sorry. Oh, I apologize. Did you want to have a comment?
Yeah, just one more comment. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Dubanow that if we deny an encroachment agreement, but I would like to see that we let the neighbors know that there will be no future plantings on the road allowance, because I don't want to give them carte blanche to plant. Now, we do have road allowances in town that have trees on them, but those trees grew naturally, and so we'll allow this road allowance for the trees to grow naturally and not allow the neighbors to be planting them. So I think that we need to make sure that we notify Mr. Maskell, is that? Yes. Yeah, notify him and his wife that there will be no future plantings on the road allowance. And that that the town now owns what's ever planted on it.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Lubberts. So I will call the question on the first that. Unless anybody else has, no? Okay. That land committee denies the request to enter into an encroachment agreement with the owners of 1799 Niagara River Parkway for vegetation planted on the Burnside Avenue Municipal Road Allowance. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion carries. And for the second that, Councillor Dubanow, did you want to make an amendment for that?
I think it was Councillor Noyes who did. I'm fine with it as it is, but if Councillor Noyes wants to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I'd like to make an amendment to the second that and taking to what Councillor Lubberts says, that vegetation be allowed to remain, but no future planting occurs. Vegetation can stay as long as it does not create a safety or sightline issue, and that a property marker indicating that this is town-owned land.
Madam Clerk, do you have that?
All of it, but I will.
Okay. And are there any questions or comments with respect to the amendment? Councillor Lubberts? Dubanow, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, it's Wednesday. We're not normally here. Madam Chair, I'm just wondering if perhaps Mr. Walsh or maybe even on the CIO just might be able to come up. What's it cost for the town to stick a survey stake in the ground? Because I think a survey had already been done. There may already be a stake there.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is that what you're looking for, Councillor? My impression was a sign rather than $500.
And if I may, Councillor Noyes, is your intent to pass that cost on to Mr. Maskell? Would the cost also be passed on to the neighbor on the other side who also similarly has access to that road allowance? I'm just trying to think of a question of fairness here. It doesn't make much sense to me to put a property marker on one side but not the other, and I think we may be opening up a can of worms here.
Councillor Noyes?
Again, it's not coming to mind, the other one, but I think the other one may have an encroachment agreement. No?
Madam Clerk?
No, I'm not aware of an encroachment agreement, Chair.
Okay, so I guess I would say, since this is before us, the neighbor's not before us, if he comes before us and there's a complaint, then I would pretty much say the same thing. But since that's not part of this thing, I know where if it came before me, what I would say. But I would think that having the property marker there should satisfy the public. We're not allowing an encroachment, we're allowing the vegetation to stay, and hopefully Mr. Maskell will be happy with that arrangement.
Any other comments? Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just to get back to the markers, Kelly, are you talking about those red and white striped markers like we have down in the streets at Waverly and different ones along the road allowance?
Mr.
Windmill,
Welch?
we have the red and they're like a 2-inch post.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I really haven't given it that much thought. I'd have to consult with our surveyor as to what was appropriate, and as
Yeah,
we
you
know,
which ones I'm
he's not
talking
here
about, though,
anymore.
right?
I will.
You know which ones I'm talking about?
Yeah,
down there?
I do, yes, absolutely.
Would
yeah.
$500 cover that? Yeah.
Oh, easy, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to flog a dead horse here on this issue. I'm okay with where Councillor Noyes is going. I just think if a survey stake or something like that satisfies it, and I just hope the actual cost, whatever it is, then that's what we do. I think that's a fair compromise. I think if it went the other way, it would be more expensive and more aggravating for the Maskells. So if they have to give a little bit of money just to cover the taxpayer resources to sort that out, I think that's a fair compromise, as long as they understand that once that marker's there, they have to plant any of their trees on the other side, and hopefully that avoids any future confusion, and that pretty much draws a line in the sand, and the pun wasn't intentional on that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow, and I believe our CAO would like to have a comment.
Thank you, through the chair. I wondered if, in terms of the amendment that's put forward, we do have an encroachment bylaw as a point of reference, because I know Councillor Noyes, you'd made reference to some terms and conditions where the town might need to exercise its right. I wondered if the amendment could be that there be no removal at this time, but the town that retains its rights under the existing encroachment bylaw. I apologize, I don't have the bylaw number, because it does provide that provision for if the town needs it for any town purpose, explicit or not, we have the right to go on and remove it if we needed to.
Thank you, Mr. CAO, and Councillor Noyes?
I thank you for that, but we're not agreeing to an encroachment agreement. There is no encroachment agreement. So we have the right to do whatever we want on the road allowance. I don't think we need to, there is no encroachment agreement. So I don't know, and we've just voted against an encroachment agreement.
Sorry, if I could just clarify, we have an encroachment bylaw. I may have said agreement. We have an encroachment bylaw which outlines our rights as the town for the existing encroachment that exists and how our rights to manage the encroachment. So it's the encroachment bylaw that's in place. So I apologize if it sounded like I was referencing an encroachment agreement. The agreements fall under the encroachment bylaw.
Madam Clerk, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, Chair. I don't have the bylaw with me, and it is bylaw number 89-07. I do recall that, and I do recall that the encroachment agreements, when we do enter into them, they do contain a clause saying that they're not required to be removed at this time, but the town reserves its right to remove them at a later date should it feel it's deemed necessary.
Sorry, and to Councillor Noyes' point that we are not entering into an encroachment agreement, would that apply? Does it really matter?
No, we're not entering into an encroachment agreement. I don't see any harm in adding what Mr. Queen has asked for. I'll leave it up to council what they'd like.
Thank you very much. Councillor Noyes, would you like to add that in then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking that it's basically saying, we said no future planting, vegetation can stay as long as it does not create a safety or sightline issue, and the town reserves the right to remove vegetation if it so deems necessary or desirable with that. And that that property markers, we put there, was that, I think that solves, I don't want to go into that we're creating this muddy water that,
Right.
you know, we're going to have the encroachment agreement bylaw apply to something that isn't an encroachment.
Sure.
So I think, but I can see adding that we're not guaranteeing that this vegetation will stay, that we're saying, okay, we reserve the right to remove it if we should see fit.
Okay,
So that's
that's
fine.
fair. That amendment is on the floor for any further comments. Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to follow up with what the CAO, I think what Mr. McQueen was trying to get at is that the plantings that are there now, we have the rights to them, not the person that planted them. So as long as they understand that whatever they planted on that road allowance is now in the ownership of the town, I don't know that we need to put it in the motion, but as long as the owners understand that, and I think we can go forward.
Okay, great, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes. Okay. To report CAO-03 LC 04 2020.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Sir?
Do we still need to vote on the second that as amended?
I thought we just did.
I thought we voted on the amendment.
Okay, so we voted on the amendment, now we have to vote on the recommendation as amended.
So let's vote on the recommendation as amended. All those in favor? That passes. Thank you. Now we can move to report CAO-03LC-4-2022, land matters as of February 10th, 2022, Land Committee meeting minutes. And that was at the March 28th, 2022 regular council meeting, which was moved by Councillor McDermott and seconded by Councillor Dubanow. Would anybody like to speak to that? Not Councillor. Mayor Redekop, it's been that kind of night.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems to me that since we dealt with this in closed session Monday night and referred to the council and committee meeting, we did give staff direction. This is going to have to be further deferred, I presume, in order to allow them to try to fulfill the directions. The only question is whether we should be deferring this to May the 16th or May the 30th, and maybe the clerk can help us on that.
Yes, Chair, if I can just take a look at the calendar here. I would suggest possibly the 30th because Ms. Sturton is only in 2 days a week and tomorrow's her second day, and I know she has started working on it, but I think she could really appreciate the extra week.
Yeah, I agree. So, Madam Chair, I would move that we further defer this matter to the May 30th, 2022 regular council meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. Are there any questions with respect to the timing of May 30th, 2022? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion carries. That brings us to, I believe, report CAO-06 LC 09 2022. Which was land matters from April 21st, 2022, and was deferred to the May 11th, 2022 special council and committee meeting. That council receives the, any questions with respect to that?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyes?
I'm just trying to see if this is the one that had the one on Montrose Road. Are the minutes included in that land committee minutes of the April 21st?
Madam Clerk, can you speak to that?
Yeah. It's, I think it's referred to as Willow Road, and it's item 19 on page 9 of 12.
I'm just wondering, what, I know that the town infrastructure did go visit the individual. The rocks were asked to be removed. I'm not sure if, I haven't had another call on, but I don't know what the follow-up for that situation was.
I do not have a recollection myself. Madam Clerk, would you be able to speak to it, or your worship?
Well, it's on page 9 of our package with respect to that report. It's 19, item 19 under Willow Road. Mr. Welch could speak to the matter because he did address it during the Land Committee meeting.
Madam Chair, so I spoke with the owners, a representative of the owner on the Tuesday following our discussions at council here. They were to relay information to the owners who were returning from a trip the next Friday, 4 days later. The owner did contact me. I believe the last name is Deschamps. The owner did contact me, let me know the rocks were for temporary storage. They were using them elsewhere on the property and that they would move them right away. I have not been out to the property to see if they have or have not been moved.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes?
I guess I'm just wondering, the purpose of removing well, they put the rocks there and there was also a fence, was so that the farmer could access the field through the road allowance. So I'm not sure whether he can access it. And he hasn't called me back, so.
Mr. Walsh?
If I may, our road superintendent and myself were on site that Tuesday, and in our opinion, that road allowance has not been used for anything in years and years and years, including access to the farm in behind.
Councillor Noyes?
I think I forwarded Kelly more information from the farmer. He did his drawings, he had some pictures, and he said, you guys just didn't go far enough. That basically he hasn't used it for a few years, but definitely if you went a little further, you would see that there is a laneway that was used. But I guess what I'm going to say is that I'll try to get back to the farmer to see if the problem is resolved. Hopefully the neighbors, like I said, that's how he uses it to get his tractor in. Again, it's something about the drain that was put in, and he can't drive his $100,000 tractor and combine over the drainage part anymore. So it may not have been used a lot, but that's now his access. And he also bought that property so he could farm it. There is another way around it, I guess, but he said I'd have to go down the road and drive down here and drive down there and go that to get into a back way. So I would just like, again, it is a road allowance. If he does need to use it, he should have access to it. And just for the neighbor to put up a fence for the sake of putting up a fence. But why does the neighbor have a fence there anyway?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't know, but the road allowance itself, it's heavily brushed at Montrose Road, and then again further back, Willow Road is heavily brushed. So again, I'm going to disagree that the farmers used it. He says years. I'll say many moons.
Anyway, I'm not going to belabor the point. I haven't, again, done a site visit or whatever, but he did send us pictures, and he did send us diagrams, and he's got surveys done, and he's got everything else. He says, I need this. I guess at this point, if he can prove his point, we can revisit this. And he insists that is exactly where he needs to go, and he has used it in the past a few years ago. So,
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other councillor? Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just to get back to Kelly, as far as the road allowance itself, even though it's heavily wooded, my understanding is there's a gate or a fence across it. And that, to me, should be removed. Because with my experience with road allowances, and if you put a fence across it after 10 years, it becomes this or that, or there's legal issues that we may run into. So if there is a gate or a fence or something across that road allowance, I would ask that it be removed.
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. I think the discussions, they may not be reflected in the minutes, are that Land Committee is to notify, or I am through Land Committee, send correspondence to the Niagara Falls owner of the property that it is an encroachment and we should, they should be entering into an encroachment agreement if they want to keep their shed on the property. I didn't see a fence out there myself, so.
Thank you. Any other councillors before I go back to you? Councillor Noyes? No? Councillor Noyes?
I think that would be exactly what the farmer's asking for, is that he has no problem with the shed, that has nothing to do with the shed. But if the road, okay, you could see that there are fence posts there. I don't know if he actually put a fence up across the post, but there were posts there. I had a picture of that. And again, the armored rock was put there after the neighbor complained. That wasn't there for a long time. But anyway, I think if either he removes it or he gets an encroachment agreement, which I doubt this council will approve, if the farmer says, no, I need it for access. So I think it's a win-win.
Mr. Walsh?
Well, currently my marching orders through Land Committee are to send the letter. So I haven't done that yet, but it is on my to-do list.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes?
So it's not automatic then if he applies for an encroachment agreement that he's going to get it, right? Okay, so then there would be a process, and then we would look a little bit more detail at both sides of the issue. And the farmer could come and show us his slides and his pictures and explain why this is difficult for him. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor? That passes. That moves us to new business inquiries. Any comments or inquiries, Your Worship?
Just with respect to the delegations that we received from the property owners on Munster Lane, they both expressed concern about September 22nd or September 2022, whenever the date was, for them to remove their encroachments. So I wonder if we could get clarification from the CAO if, in fact, there's a problem and they do run into difficulties in removing these encroachments, they can request the Land Committee provide further extension, could they not?
Mr. McQueen?
Thank you. Through the chair, I did have an opportunity to speak to Mr. Walsh earlier today just to find out what the time sensitivity was around projects that might occur along those laneways. And it's my understanding that, due to the construction industry, the same issue that the residents have expressed, we don't have the project slated for construction for this construction season. But we would be looking for, in a future report, some consideration by council for the capital for the project to move forward in 2023. There's currently the appeal on the secondary plan, but from what I understand, there is a hope that they'll release those areas. So we at this point wouldn't be proceeding in 2022 as a result of that, but certainly in 23, if they release those areas under appeal, we would be looking at moving forward in 23 during the construction season. So an extension to the end of April of 23 would not impede the town's project in any way and give the property owner some additional time as they had requested.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, so I'm wondering whether we should just let them know that there doesn't appear now to be a time-sensitive need for the municipality to have that opened up, so that if they do need additional time, they should be in communication with the town. Can we do that, Mr. Walsh? Were you listening? Good answer. Good answer. Yeah.
Any other further inquiries? No? That moves us to the business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll return the chair back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butler. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Councillor Noyes?
There's an infrastructure meeting on the May 25th at 3 p.m. in probably Committee Room 1.
Any other meetings? Go ahead.
This really isn't a meeting, but in one of my other meetings, it came apparent that on May 24th, at the Leisureplex, there's going to be an opportunity for people to drop off unused medication, and it's put on by the Niagara Regional Health Unit, the Niagara Regional Police. I don't have all the information, but I think if we could get that information and perhaps put it out there for the public.
If you get that information, you should provide that to Mr. McQueen, and then he can take a look at that and speak with our communications manager.
Okay, thank you.
Any other meetings? Then Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to move that this special council and committee meeting adjourn at 7:56 PM.
All those in favor? None opposed? That is carried. That's the longest three-day council meeting.